streaming. Damn, I love that tune. Are we live? Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who love to talk about movies, yappity yap yap, yak yak, as much as they love watching them, and perhaps a little more. Today, join us tonight as my good friend Jim Chaboyko and I overanalyze the German the German World War II heist flick, Blood and Gold. Here, speaking of which, here is the log line, according to IMDb. At the end of World War II, in the dying days of World War II, that's my edition, a German soldier, a deserter, is looking for his daughter, while an SS troop is looking for Jewish treasure. What could possibly go wrong? All right, let's cut to my good friend, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, man? Well, there we go.
Just
That's
glad
enough
this
of
damn war is over.
Tell us, Jim. Tell us, Mr. Chaboyko. Bear with me.
Sorry. Sure, yeah.
Why don't you tell us about who's in this flick? Who do we got in this little show?
It is directed by Peter Thorwarth, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, who also had a hand in writing it, along with Stefan Barth. And the main stars are Robert Masser, it's with two A's, Jordis Treibel, and Marie Hack, or Hacke, because there's an E on the end.
It's
a few of the others, Alexander Scheer, Roy McCrary, Stephen Grossman, and Simon Rupp as Paul, who is an interesting character.
Getting that E.
Yeah.
That E brings it up a little.
There we go. Yes, and so that's some of the crew there, or the cast, and in this German feater. So
another German feature. We've done a few of them now. This is the first from this director, I believe, though.
Yes, I think so.
You know what? Before we get into the spoiler zone, Jim,
Sure.
let me ask you this straight up.
Mm-hmm.
Blood and Gold, see it or skip it?
You know, I'd sort of lean towards skipping it. I'd be interested to hear what you thought. It was sort of a post Tarantino, a little bit paint by numbers, and some of the choices they made kind of ended up disappointing me. Some of the choices that the storytellers made,
Gotcha.
I thought had potential, and then they ultimately sort of disappointed me. A lot of the stuff I think we've seen
Okay, so
before. So
yeah. All right. Myself, Jim, I am going to say see it. You're absolutely right. It does have some story problems, which I'm looking forward to talking to you about. But that said, for this kind of film, the genre of film that I actually think it is, I think it does better than many other Westerns. And I'm going to make that argument later why it's a Western, but I think it's done a better job than many recent American Westerns, some of which we've covered on this channel, to engage with the, let's say, the history of the Western by putting in this different context. And that's what makes this a see it. Plus, there's a couple moments I laughed intentionally, I'm sure from the filmmaker's perspective, out loud. Okay. With that out of the way, you know what, folks? I think it's that time. Let's get into the spoiler zone.
The spoiler zone.
That's right, Jim, the spoiler zone. And also maybe a quick welcome to those folks we've got in the chat. Who do we have here? I know I saw Walt65.
Mm-hmm.
Good to
From
see
the
him.
less humid side of Canada, currently, I'm presuming. Yeah.
Yeah,
And,
great to see you. And it looks like Jelly Duck 100. So we got a couple of old timers. You know what? I think they deserve a bit of the air horn too, don't you, Jim? Don't you think?
Yes, absolutely.
Anyway, great to see you
good.
guys. And
Yeah.
actually, it's interesting. I'm going to read first. Yes, thank you very much, Jelly Duck 100. We did break 400 yesterday. Ooh. We can say we have hundreds of subscribers now, Jim.
Hundreds.
You know,
multiple hundreds.
Next goal is several hundreds.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, thank you very much, Jelly Duck, and thank you for being one of the sub 100 subscribers.
Yes,
Same with you,
yeah.
Walt65. Walt says, and I think this is a perfect way for me to start with my first spoiler zone question. Walt says, this flick easily has one of the greatest grindhouse trailers since early Tarantino. Can the actual movie be half as good? And, well, you can see we've got an actual, first time in a while, Jim, that we have a real split in our see it and skip it. But that is the first question I wanted to ask you, Jim. This film is described as Tarantino-esque or Quentin-esque. Would you agree with that? And even whether you do or don't, how do you think, is that a good thing or a bad thing, and why?
Well, I mean, it's
And
I
why?
had written it. I didn't really read anything about this before I watched it, and so I did in my notes while watching it. I wrote down Tarantino several times. I don't think I think a lot of other people have come to that conclusion. It's kind of interesting as Tarantino's thinking of retiring or talking about retiring, showing no signs of retiring, but you know, the sort of the rumors there that he'll retire after his 10th
one film left.
Yeah, I guess we're looking at maybe close to being a post. Yeah, being close to a post-Tarantino landscape here, almost, and
Allegedly.
you know, 30. I mean, yeah, his earlier movies were 30 years ago now, so It'd be interesting to see his effects now, sort of
Yeah.
historically. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think he's shaken up film. He's made it more exciting. He's a little
But
bit cheeky, a little bit irreverent,
but
and
I'm not asking
I
about what you think of Tarantino. I'm asking
yeah,
you
no, but
what you think about this flick in that comparison.
I think that the effects is that maybe it gives them a little more stylistic freedom.
Okay.
Gives other directors, so I think that's not a bad thing.
Okay. What do you think though? It was funny. There are a couple of scenes in this film, and for those of you who haven't seen it, it's an interesting. I would actually, I am. I'm calling it. I put this. You can see up on the screen right now. You can see the thumbnail I used, the Western Redeemed. I really do, folks, see this as a Western. I think it has a lot of those Western beats, right down to the deserter, the end of the war, much like a lot of Westerns were established. The films, the stories would
Yep.
be established right after the Civil War, hung in a wasteland without men or very few children and old men. As these soldiers are coming home, the discipline is falling apart. They're almost like roving gangs. You have a small rural town, maybe not lawless, but certainly a town with sin.
Getting
The
there.
church, like there's so many, Jim, so many notes, let's say,
Yeah.
that I really was kind of struck by. I would call it a Western. And
Oh yeah.
what's interesting is you see moments, and Tarantino has certainly been influenced by that, especially those spaghetti Westerns. And so I kind of see, maybe, am I seeing in Horvath's work here, Horvath, right? What the heck?
You're close. It's
Thorvarth. Thorvarth.
yeah,
Sorry.
sorry.
Torvarth.
I had it on another
Thorvarth.
tab.
Is he being influenced by Tarantino? There's that moment early in the film when he's hiding in the farmhouse. The young woman is trying to BS as the sergeant is, why are there 3 cups? And then the camera the camera does a pedestal up, and you see him, the Heinrich, our hero, one of our heroes, looking down on the scene, much like in Inglourious Bastards, except that the camera goes down, pedestals down, and these people are hidden under the stairs. So you see moments like that, but otherwise I'm like, this is a Western through and through. The music cues, so
Yeah.
I'm kind of thinking about what you were saying about Tarantino, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of get that now, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that's, once you say, oh, he's very influenced by Tarantino, it's like, who hasn't been?
Yeah.
And does it all of a sudden kind of limit somebody having a great swing at the American Western? I've said before in this channel, there is no such thing as another Western. By the end of this, I have to eat those words. I think you can, some countries can do a Western that isn't American.
Oh, yeah.
I think this is a
Yeah.
perfect example of it. One of the reasons why I think it's a see it.
Yeah, I mean that part's all interesting. Another interesting question: if it's not, if our director isn't influenced directly by the old movies, which are available to him, of course. If it is Tarantino, it's the westerns through Tarantino, which sort of makes it a second. It's like when you photocopy something twice, it's like a second degree. So it's sort of like through the prism of Tarantino, the 50s or the post-war Western or what have you. So that's kind of an interesting concept anyway.
Well, and this is where,
But,
Walt
even
says it in
after
the chat, but I thought it was like, this has got spaghetti Western, the not corrupt, but the morally damaged priest, town priest. He's
Yep.
obviously forsaken his vows in some ways. He is behaving as though he's failed his community.
His hair's turned white in the course
Yep.
of
Like,
not a long time.
Yep.
5 years. Or 7 years.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're talking about Westerns, even after the opening credits, which actually have a bit of a Western font, I think it cuts immediately to a horse clomping through the street.
It does.
So you're
I
just like,
laughed. I was
Yeah,
like, look,
yeah.
there's even a
It's like,
horse. But even as they're riding
where am
through
I?
town, the SS gang is
Yeah.
riding through town. There's some of those music cues. And that leads me to another question I wanted to ask you, Jim, was about the music. What did you think when you thought of the music within this? Because it's exegetic, like if it's part of the soundtrack, it's very much a Western, it seems, like a Western, but like a spaghetti Western, Sergio Leone,
Yeah.
whereas when it's in, I wanted to hear your thoughts before I gave you mine. So what did you think about the soundtrack? I think
do
there's
a
a
couple
lot going
things.
on there.
Yeah, they do a couple things here. Is that they have that sort of Western music. You almost expect to hear the "Hip, ho ho" in the background with that twangy guitar, but they use some sort of in the suspense sequences or the chase sequences. They use some more sort of modern sounding music, and then overlaid on top of all that, I think about 4 or 5 times, if I'm not mistaken, during the movie, they use old timey like hits from the late 30s, early 40s, wartime German hits. I suspect more to an ironic degree, but that's kind of going on, and they actually have a
One
record
moment it was
player. I
Lily
think.
Marlene.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Which at the we're nearing the big turn, or
Yeah.
nearing a big turn, and it's like, that was a big pre-war almost.
I think it might have even been First World War. I don't know. Walt would probably know that.
Here, I'm gonna pull it up on.
Sure. But yeah, they were, and they actually, again, if I'm not mistaken, they had a record player, and they actually played records at some points during the movie. So that was, I think, a really interesting choice.
Here it is, Jim. We'll put it up on the big screen. Lily Marlene. Marlene. German love song became popular during World War II throughout Europe amongst both Axis and Allied troops. Written in 1915 as a poem, published in 1937, first recorded by Lale Anderson as Das Mädchen unter der Lantern, the girl under the lantern. You get this song, and I just think there's a lot more going on in that soundtrack than maybe the film's being given credit for. And you're right, there's like almost Where Have All the Flowers Gone? Which was the song played over the credits.
Yes,
but
yeah.
I almost want to go through the soundtrack now and kind of, it makes me think of American Graffiti.
Okay. Yeah.
In how it's none of these songs, they're all kind of, what's the word used when you're saying it's not really of that time, but it's,
I used to
it's not, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
somebody maybe will put it in the
anachronistic.
Anachronistic, thank you.
Yeah. Anachronism.
An anachronism. I think a lot of these songs are anachronisms, yet they're thematically appropriate.
Yes. Yeah.
And as part of the vibe that that he was trying to give, like, because I even noticed, like, you get the Western soundtrack, but it's never hit really hard. For whatever reason, when they're mixing it, they never press the button hard on that. It would we hear the diegetic music, the in the story music better, clearer. than we do until the end of the movie, you know?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, definitely some interesting choices, and I really liked, I don't watch that many German movies. That this is something I haven't seen a lot of soundtracks with, hits from the hits from K-Tel's hits from the German 30s, but kind of again, watching foreign movies, you're exposed to different things, so that's kind of cool.
Yeah. You know what? So I do. What about this? You mentioned you thought there was some paint by numbers, some problems. Before I go into mine, because I do have a list, it's not a perfect movie by any stretch. And if I had paid $20 in the theater, I might be giving you a different answer.
Yeah.
Wait till it's on Netflix, folks. Skip it until it's on Netflix. What were the story problems from your perspective? Get into the spoilers. Feel free to get into the spoilers.
Yeah,
I'm gonna answer Walt's question here in the chat while you're doing that.
There's a couple things. I thought that the way that they handled the villains, of course, there's a whole series of antagonists. I thought it was, kind of tiring. There was the one character, I think he was named Dorfler, but I can only find Sergeant. He's credited as Sergeant on IMDb and some of the other things. He's this sort of, almost unstoppable sociopath. And it's one of these characters that I get a little bit tired of. He sort of reminded me of...
Tom Berenger played this guy in Platoon in 1980, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, and just that kind of like unstoppable force. He always gets the drop on everyone. And just the cruelty, getting right up into the guy's face. And some of the choices there, there's a scene where his boss, who I believe was played by Alexander Shear was the guy's name. But... the lieutenant, I think, with the scarred face and the
Lieutenant
mask
Colonel
to cover
Oberstführer.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But there's a scene where our heroine is captured, and they sit down for a meal, and it's the cow that the family owned, and they were eating the meat, and it's all sort of luxurious and succulent when everyone else is starving.
Another
I just
great...
thought, man, I've seen this so many times before. I've seen it in this movie and that movie, and he sort of comes on to her, and I thought, this is Raiders of the Lost Ark kind of, and where they captured Karen Allen, and there's so many that I just sort of check, and there was nothing fresh. What are you going to bring fresh to the Nazis? But I guess that's your job as a writer. There's nothing fresh. I'll tell you what, there was one scene earlier on where a rape is averted, and it's when they first come upon the farmhouse with our heroes inside.
Yeah.
And there's
the
three
reverse
officers.
Inglourious Bastards moment. It goes up.
Yes.
The guy saves.
And there's
yeah.
what you were referring to earlier. And there's three officers, I guess. The rest are sort of just soldiers, but there's three officers. Two of them are all like, yeah, let's do this, and the one guy's like, what are we, the Red Army? No, I'm gonna go report this, or we're gonna get in trouble, or something to that effect. And I thought, boy, wouldn't it have been interesting if that guy was the main antagonist rather than the true believer,
an honest true believer,
the sociopath with no borders. So that's anytime we were presented with like, oh, hey, this is kind of interesting, and this happened all movie long, nothing happened. It sort of went in the typical way rather than the atypical way. Yeah. There's another one with an older woman later on in the movie, and she gets her minute, but she's ultimately punished for having that minute immediately. And I just thought, well, there's another interesting character erased. So lots of headshots to the conscience, figures representing the conscience of the town as well. Three at least. So I thought, of course they get shot in the head.
But part of me is kind of okay with that. Like, there is the sins of the town. You know, this
No,
is what I mean about
Yeah.
how I thought it was thematically, it's kind of thematically interesting. Unlike a lot of, instead of showing the townspeople as these poor victims of outside thugs, they're just innocent homesteaders. You know, there's an acknowledgement of the history, which is what I think is interesting about it as a Western, because especially when the American Western was started, it was almost literally, we are going to erase or say black is white on all our history. This is perfectly reasonable for these town folk to be here, and they're the poor victims in all of this. Where are the natives? You know, it's actually acknowledging it. But as far as the story goes, you're absolutely right. There is a moment for me, Jim. I rolled my eyes. My first big eye roll.
Oh yeah.
Was Paula in general. It's like, of course he's going to go back. I mean, can we just can we get to that point now where we know what he's going to do? Folks, for you haven't seen the film, Paula is, what is the woman's name? Elsa's kid brother. He is, Down syndrome, maybe?
I think, yeah.
And
the actor has Down syndrome as well. It should be mentioned.
And he's a trope. He's not even, he's barely a character. He's an excuse to advance the plot. It could have been done with a gizmo. You didn't need a human being. He's, of course, going to go back, which is what's going to drag Heinrich and Maria back into the town, even though they've got a clean getaway. And, of course, he goes back. And, of course, through a contrived set of circumstances, he ends up back in the town. That said, Jim, and I wrote it down, I was like, oh, Paul's a problem. Like, it's funny, the storytelling issues are all wrapped up in characters, so I think I agree with you on many levels here, or on many of the story points. But I was just like, oh, Paul's a problem. And then, of course, Maria and Heinrich, or not Maria, I keep calling her Maria, that's her the actor's actual
Elsa.
name. Elsa's, I'll have to go back. And then Heinrich, we'll go back. Of course we'll go back. And I'm like, what? This hero should forever be dragged back. Like, oh, God damn it, we shouldn't go back. He's got a daughter. He's got a goal.
Yeah.
Why is he automatically waylaid? No question. His original goals totally thrown out the door. So of course they go back, which I'm like, kind of, wow, that was easy.
Well, the sergeant says, I will go back tomorrow morning and get that cow or something. And then, bingo.
Yeah. Well,
Everything
get
aligns.
him. And then
of course,
get him.
Get him. Yeah.
Yeah. Then, and this I thought was interesting, was the moment, it's like when Paula fights back, pushes one of the soldiers out of the church, the bell tower, where he's supposed to be hung publicly, pushes him out, blah.
Yeah.
And then gets the drop on the other guy and shoots some of them up. And it was like, well, that's interesting. Oh, but
exactly.
Wait. But then this is the other. It's like, oh, wait. And then he's shot because you got to get him out of the way because you don't want him. He has served his plot purpose.
Yep.
He has forced the couple into the church where the rest of the action can happen. We can kill him and get him out of the way. And it's so lazy that I'm like, I'm kind of happy they killed him because I didn't want to see this actor having to just follow through on plot points. It's like, oh wait, do you need me to do that thing so you guys can do the interesting stuff? All right, thanks for nothing.
Yeah, slightly horrifying too to have an actual person with Down syndrome with the Nazis force him to wear a placard saying "I do not deserve to be alive." I
Yeah.
just thought, and yeah, it's supposed to be cruel, but I thought, oof, that's kind of
Well, but
that's a tricky thing, but
I
probably
think
not
that's
unrealistic.
what's thematically important.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that they touch on those points.
Yeah,
That I was more concerned. I don't know about you, Jim, but it's like Jewish treasure, like right in the
yes,
and Netflix is really lazy when they translate these log lines, and IMDb just cut paste. But even that I thought was held well. That they're like, no, we stole that gold because that's what happened. Their property was stolen. It was theirs and it was stolen while an angry mob burned the rest of their stuff. And I was like, unlike an American Western, like even ones we've seen, Jim, on this channel made in the last 10 years, this is one where it's like, no, we're going to acknowledge the context that this adventure came out of.
yeah,
And I mean, yes, Heinrich and Elsa and was Irmgard?
yes, Irmgard, yeah.
Irmgard. They're the only Nazi haters in town. It's like,
yeah.
sure.
About
not every German was a Nazi, but
no. About
rural
three
communities were usually a lot more.
Yeah. There's a couple things here too. Is that about 3/4 of the way through it, I thought this is kind of interesting because it's basically a bunch of Germans after sort of attempting to destroy three different factions. You have the Waffen coming into town. You have the
local
townspeople.
thieves.
and though the mayor is a functionary, a Nazi functionary, and he's kind of goofy and clumsy and nervous, that doesn't mean he's a gentle guy. Because he was, when they have the flashback, he was the one about getting the Lowensteins out of town. He was the loudest one about it, and you're like, oh yeah. These guys don't get those positions by accident. And then you have the sort of the people that are a little more sympathetic, the priest and Irmgard, who didn't really do much, but they didn't like,
They
they did
by.
And they were, when they were able to help Elsa and Heinrich, they did. And so there's sort of like three factions, each of them tearing each other apart. At the end, is there any of the town left? Is there any of the Waffen core left?
Well,
I don't think so.
They're all gone. Every one of them died, including even what could have been the good guy, until Sonya puts a bullet in his head. What could have been the one good soldier, but in the end, he gets all smiley when he's looking at the gold.
The gold. Yeah. So there's that, and the other thing too that I sort of wish they had done on a planning basis, or I don't know. I wish they had introduced the flashback with the Lowensteins earlier, so we knew that there are different factions in town. They sort of hinted at it a little bit. They had this sort of colder woman in her 30s that was sort of walking around, and she obviously had something. So under her, she had some secrets going on. I sort of wish they had brought that in earlier, to set that up so you knew that. And that's sort of one of the things that I thought it's a shame that they didn't do that a little bit earlier. Also, go ahead.
I think there's a couple other ones where I thought maybe a little bit of setup. I was okay with the townspeople. We're not getting a whole bunch of depth there. It is only 100 minutes. And how would you... I thought of you when I was thinking about it afterwards, and I was like, yeah, there's a lot of balls in the air. You know, and you almost drop in a couple. And I think the Oberstführer, the lieutenant colonel, the one in charge of this troop, the true believer, all I could think of when he gets all weird with Elsa, and he's talking about a young Jewish woman that he was in love with, knew what was going to happen to her, so because he's a good guy, you know, kills her because that's what good guys do, apparently. What if we had seen just a little moment when he first sees her, and, you know, even just some little setup, like early on, he's looking at a locket, you know, and it kind of looks like Elsa, and, you know, he closes it and then they drive. Or, you know, you can have that moment, and then when he sees her all angry in the town square in front of the church, you can have a moment from his point of view where it's like, and he might even say, Rebecca, come with me, put her in the car. And all of a sudden you get a bit of, he becomes a little more real, like a real person, that there's a history. And then we don't even have to hear half of what he tells her.
Yeah.
And the creepy thing with the ring hidden in his eye, because, sure.
When you saw him with the mask, did you question whether or not we were going to see him without the mask at some point?
You don't have that mask
doubt
there and not show it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like they say, tell, don't show.
That mask was coming off. He was, and I actually thought it wasn't bad for, you know, the budget they obviously had. I was like, don't show us too much. Show us late. Creep us out a little and then move on, because you do not have the money to really gross us out.
And the other thing that's interesting, too, is that they used his open wounds under the mask to actually tell part of the story, to show part of the story. Well, you get to see the, spoiler alert again, the cyanide capsule, shove it into something,
like,
and then she
this is the
punches
thing.
him in the face,
like, they have these moments of genius.
Oh, that was great.
Moments of genius, like the way she bumps him off. Even Heinrich looks like he's going to die, and all of a sudden, Elsa's got to go rescue him with the old lady who apparently is a hunter. I wonder, though, because she was referring to who do you think shot who, the old lady, Irmgard. And I'm wondering if, Jim, there was a scene left on the cutting room floor that we didn't get to set her up better. Because we only learned she's a badass deep into the third act. But
I'm there for that. I was there for Irmgard all the way.
Fun.
Yeah,
that they're her and this old lady are the cavalry. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And but the other great genius turn, a great story moment for all these weak ones. Every now and then they have Paula pushing one soldier out the tree.
And like, falling gorily to the ground. It wasn't just a little. It wasn't a mannequin like on SCTV. It was like the guy's face was mush on the ground.
And then if like everyone gets to live, like I mean, it's a great moment. And then you have deep in the third act, and Heinrich is dying, and the bastard sergeant.
Dorfler, I think it was.
Thanks. There he is saving his life with a blood transfusion, which is well set up, and it's like there's a great moment. There's a great bit of storytelling. There's a you're lucky we're both the same blood type, and
he has the tattoo with his blood type in his arm, and. Yeah, that was kind of cool. I meant to I didn't write it down, but I thought that was kind of a puzzling and kind of interesting moment, too.
Yeah, a great moment, and I bought it. I wasn't puzzled. I was like, the guy's like, I want my gold. What do we got to... we're not letting this one die. I killed the poor guy.
Cool. Yeah.
Not poor guy from his perspective. And you are right. Like, I mean, he's kind of not Snidely Whiplash, but he's that psychopath without any redeeming or anything interesting. And then the true believer lieutenant colonel in charge, it's like, I'm not saying that there weren't, and that's what's interesting about this film is that there were plenty, like there was still holdouts in the hills fighting occupying forces after the surrender. But he was cartoonish in his, in his cruelty and evilness. And another almost homage moment with what's his name from Inglourious Bastards and Diane Kruger plays the woman, can't remember, but they have that with the cream puff, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I did want to mention too the fighting scenes were actually quite well choreographed. But again, just about the sergeant, the
yes,
Dorfler,
you're right.
There was a couple of spots there that sort of made me uneasy. There was a lot of the almost rape or the attempted rape, and also he gets the drop on.
We can call it a sexual assault.
Assault, absolutely, yeah. And to the point, like they took it really far, and it seemed to there seemed to be a lot more. Like I thought it was kind of creepy. And then the other one, he's got the drop on her again, and he's choking her to the point where the camera focuses on the fact that she's got vertical hemorrhaging, like those when the blood veins come out in her eyes. And I just thought, this is, again, there's too much glee in this for what, tonally it was sort of different than the rest of the movie. And then before that, Heinrich and the sergeant, the private and the sergeant, because the sergeant keps on calling him
Heinrich
Lanza.
is always,
Lanza, which I guess
he never has a name with him.
No. They have a great fight, like a really nicely choreographed, almost like a chop socky kind of.
You always knew where you were. It never got confusing.
Yeah. And they're throwing furniture at each other and using other things. I mean, that was probably not realistic. It was kind of John Wicky, and I thought it was really well done. So a lot of weird sort of tonal transitions in this, and
you're right. Like I thought the first. Let's say the first time actually the only sexual assault that's even hinted at was actually really well done in that it didn't seem to be male gazy. I'm thinking of Zack Snyder or Michael Bay or it didn't seem like any kind of I didn't feel that it was creepy. I think it really was a good job of ratcheting up the tension where it's like, what is going to break here?
Yeah.
Because something's got to break, and that they bring it close but don't. Yeah. And it's like, oh, thank God. Yes. Like for me, it's something like, oh, I don't want to see this.
Yeah.
And then cut, or not cut, but action breaks. Yeah. Buddy, like it's an important plot point. It doesn't feel contrived. Mm-hmm. The only thing that really took me out of that was the Red Army crack. Walt65 says in the chat about, that's interesting given the current context. And all I could think is, now, by this time, it's been well established. Wasn't just the SS. It was the Wehrmacht. Soldiers rape. Period. Soldiers. Canadians were doing it in Afghanistan. Doesn't mean they were always caught, but that's what soldiers do. That's a horrible part of war. It's not even a bug. It's sorry, folks, just a sec here.
No.
Oh, that was not meant. That was what I wanted to say is it's not sexual assault
Yeah.
is not a bug of war. It's a feature. And
Yeah.
so we're not the Red Army at that point. It's like that would have it would have felt more real and it would have hit harder if it's like, hey, whoa, we're not the Red Army. We'll share. Like something
Or
like
something
that.
like
Like
yeah.
something. I mean, not to say that that wasn't part of the propaganda. Oh, the Red Army's coming. They're going to be doing all these terrible things. You got to fight for the father, fight for the women folk. That was happening. And at the same time, the Red Army was coming and they were like actively encouraged to. But, it's not like other occupying forces weren't coming in from the West. Maybe not as shamelessly as the Red Army. But,
Yeah.
like, I mean, it's not a sexual assault in war, not a bug, but a feature.
And the same
rim
thing,
shot was not that was just an accident.
Yeah. No, and at the same time, if you avoided the subject, if you had a bunch of guys come upon a farm with
At
two
the
people in it,
end, where it's all kind of falling apart.
yeah, I think it'd be unrealistic not to acknowledge that was happening unless you had a
Unless-
super,
Going back to your idea, is like you said, it's the guy. He's the antagonist. Is the one. Hey, we're not doing that here. Especially you. I'm keeping an eye on the.
oh yeah,
The
you could have a super righteous villain, right? And
Yeah.
and that that might have been more interesting, but
Yeah.
what have you? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, mind you, with that all that Western style music, Western, like as in the genre, not
Yeah. I'm surprised there were a couple of red-tailed
as
hawks.
interpreted by Sergio Leone,
Yeah,
and
exactly. I didn't know red-tailed hawks were in Germany, but
and I would say Walt 65 said Leone was just Kurosawa Stetsons. Well, Kurosawa was Ford with samurai helmets. Like none of these guys are original.
yeah.
They're all influenced. They're all every artist is a unique sandwich of influences. Speaking of which, I do think we got a few new folks in the chat.
Oh.
Let's shout them out briefly, Jim,
haven't been
before
paying
we
attention.
get into our before we start wrapping things up. Final thoughts, themes. What's the point of this all? But first, let's give a big shout out to Walt 65 again.
Sorry.
And we've got Dragon Movie Guy. Whoops.
Oh.
Dragon Movie Guy. He's him and I did a great podcast. I'm still editing it, but we did a great podcast the other day while you were out of action, Jim, on talking about movies made for television versus movies made for the theater, and can you have one that works really well in one medium versus the other, where it's like, wow, this is less because I'm seeing it in X or Y, but great for what it was made for. Great conversation we had, and that'll be out shortly. And then, of course, we have, oh my goodness, is that Richard L.? And a number of
guys.
congratulations from folks in the chat about our hitting 400. Of course, the next time I look at it, it's going to be $3.99.
Yeah, exactly. I'm out of here. These guys are too smug with their 400. I'm out of here.
Let me ask you this, Jim,
Sure.
before we start winding it down. I've referred to thematic, theme, et cetera, but never really addressed it dead on. What do you think of the point of this? What's the point of this film?
I was going to bring this up sort of along the lines of my final thoughts, but you've heard that a big sort of Nazi ideology was blood and soil, right? And they talk a lot about blood,
Oh,
blood,
yeah,
blut. They mention it a number of times, usually in a speechifying kind of
yeah. And a
atmosphere.
harangue, whipping
And a
up a
harangue,
crowd. Yeah,
we are not giving up. We would, lose,
yeah. No,
shed
that's a
our
great
blood.
point.
So blood and soil is their sort of thing, the fatherland, what have you. So this is called blood and gold, and I sort of was openly wondering if it's not a rhyme or anything, but if it's a play on that kind of thing, because we're at a point in the war here that almost nobody does anything for the fatherland. Like everyone seems to be essentially, well,
Trying
especially
to
with
figure out.
yeah, an angle. Like
Yeah.
anybody in a uniform, our guy has a little bit more of a decent motive, getting home to his daughter, but the rest of them, no, they talk a big game, but nobody's doing anything for Der Fuhrer, and no one's doing anything for the fatherland. They're all sort of looking out for number one, and I sort of wonder if it's that corruption of the movement. I think it's perhaps about something like that.
Well,
That
was it about the
the
corruption
dishonesty,
of it, or
perhaps?
was it always?
Well,
Like,
that's the thing,
'cause
right?
I
Yeah,
don't think he's like.
bit of a death
I
cult.
don't think it's a pro. You know what?
No, no,
Not
no.
National Socialism was just
Yeah.
taken over by some bad apples and
Yeah,
wrecked it.
exactly,
This is
yeah.
not where this guy's going.
Well, maybe it's
kind
the
of it's like
yeah,
what happened is what destroyed us,
yeah,
including these. You know what? Another feature of war is to turn young men into killers. It's not like they didn't. Gwyn Dyer's right. Gwyn Dyer in
Uh-oh. He's got the book.
War is. You want the latest edition, folks. Anyone's son will do, and now daughter.
Yeah.
Army, give them 6 weeks, they'll turn your children into killers. But what happens then at
Yeah.
the end of it? And you've broken these people. They're not irreparably broken,
Yeah.
but they are. Sorry,
Uh,
they are damaged.
yeah. 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 I think it's maybe lifting the veil off what
Yeah.
it really was all about. Was just about the corruption of the soul, the
Yeah.
the enriching of the self, all that other kind of stuff, the kind of the death cult, which is what they were, and
Yeah.
the fascist, the might is right and all that kind of stuff. How did that work out? How did your 1,000-year Reich work out for you?
Yeah.
What about year 13? What happened after that?
Well, I do like the fact, and yeah, I think there's something in that there. The townsfolk are not innocents here.
no.
Whether it be the particular Sonia, the Burgermeister, the mayor, his other folks he's in cahoots with.
I think a banker and something.
But
and
it
somebody
was managed to whip everyone else into running and then murdering. They didn't even, they barely got to run him out of town. Murdered the one Jewish family they had. Unlike, folks, you want to, I don't know if it'll make you feel bad or feel great, but read up about how Denmark looked after their Jewish community while being occupied by Germany during World War II. You may end up feeling worse because of how the whole country stepped up.
Oh yeah.
You know?
There were several countries actually that there was a difference,
Yeah.
and it's
But
kind of
I
kind
think
of amazing.
Denmark's like a particular, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, that they did that, and that is what's thematically exciting to me. Is it's the Western redeemed, because it's going for a lot of the same tropes, a lot of the same beats, Yet it's a bit more because of that acknowledgement of historical context, which kind of excites me. I'm like, kind of, it is not perfect. You're right. The comments you made, Jim, even myself, it's like, Paula, it's like, really? You couldn't have come up with a better way? Like, that was the only way you could get him back into town? And even Heinrich, who's ostensibly the hero here, or a hero, that he just automatically switch. I'll get to my daughter when I get to it. There's something more important here. It's like, no, there should have been more struggle. He should have been tested along the way. And I think that's maybe it, is no major character. Elsa isn't tested. Heinrich isn't tested. They always just do what's right. Period. And Irmgard, I felt bad for her dying. I get why the priest died. A lot of the others. What did you think, though, of how Sonia met her end?
Yeah, sometimes
folks,
we talk
you
about...
haven't seen it. Sonia, one of the 4 folks who conspired to steal this family's wealth. Like all of their material goods sold, their businesses sold, everything concentrated into this gold so that they could escape Germany in 1938 and move to Palestine, to get out. They conspired to steal. They whipped up a crowd to murder, and then they hid this gold.
Yeah.
This corrupting gold. Anyway, Sonia ends up like a scene out of Shallow Grave, murdering her co-conspirators or escaping murder. Like, she murders a couple of people, helps one of her co-conspirators prangs him on the head and gets another one to murder him. Murders one of these soldiers, driving off like into the sunset when a German tank blows her up.
In the Waffen staff car. And the Americans were, the Americans are like, shouldn't we have shot a firing shot? Is this a warning shot? Or
the war is over.
Yeah. And of course, you have the black soldier questioning the white officer. I sort of thought,
sergeant. Even that it was a mixed race unit in 1945 was probably not happening. That said,
so that one was, she was the kind of the
she
the
had
funny
to
thing
die.
It eliminated the last
of this film.
The last major character in the town. Was taken out that way, and so she didn't get away scot-free. And ultimately, none of the Germans got the gold. It all went to, and then, the Americans were saying, should we report this? Maybe not. So, you get 1 gold bar for every one of the 30 men. That's, we're all good. But,
part of me was thinking, I've seen horror films like that, where the evil cursed treasure destroys all it touches, except for the one character who is willing to say, nope, don't need that. So she's blown up, for those who are cursed children.
Blown up by an American tank, and then I think one of the last shots is she's crawling, that she's been mortally wounded.
Her head comes up as everyone else is just taking her ill-gotten gains.
And for an attractive, sort of woman in her late 30s, nice hair, nice dress, she's all burnt. And that sort of a point is made of that she's just been singed.
Well, now
not just singed, but like...
But half her scalp is... Yeah. Now, going back to something you said earlier, now that's where, while the sexual assault is, I was rightly... but I thought it worked in the way it was handled and the way it was cut short. It was great. But you are right, except for Irmgard, the women, like even the Burgermeister, he's murdered, but he's murdered off camera. Whereas the women who get it in this movie we see it.
Yeah.
We see that cruelty. It's not like there's men are treated as cruelly. I'm not like, but it's like, wow, every woman has to be strangled.
Yeah.
We have to and so, yeah, I think that's a fair point you make there.
Yeah. Well, and even if you think about the Elsa character,
Like Sonya had to die, but
Yeah.
why the Burgermeister? Oh, that happens. We have to think of his dignity, of course.
Yes, yeah.
As he's murdered with a shovel,
With a shovel, yeah, and
perhaps
with
cutting his head off.
juicy shovel sounds.
Yeah.
When you think of the Elsa character, she's sexually assaulted, and then the Ober Lieutenant, whatever, he considers her
Property. Yeah.
a sexual object as well, in that
He's going to marry her and love her.
yeah,
but
he
it's
asks
still,
her to.
I will take you.
They get engaged sort of
Yeah.
for about 3 hours, and then but nothing happens, and sort of then again, and then she also gets strangled again by that initial sergeant. So she's sort of
Although I'm wondering
thrown
if
around
you
a little
could-
bit.
I'm wondering if you could, at the same time, again, some of these are features of war.
Yeah, true.
Not bugs. And so that if Elsa just skated through like a 50s World War II movie, skated, actually, I'm thinking of Guns of Navarone, which the more I think about that film, every time I can't even finish it now. Sorry, Walt, I find that film actually not good and a little bit offensive. But the way they address women in that film, whereas here, I think it's in some ways, a lot more modern.
Yeah.
And these women do have agency. Even Elsa saving Heinrich isn't, I'm in love. It's you know what? I need
pragmatic.
help.
Yeah.
I do need a guy because it's getting worse. It's, an end of a war can be a terrible time, but not in I'll just save him. He's so there's not a princess thing going here. This isn't Little Mermaid. Oh my goodness, he looks so sexy hanging from a rope. It's very much a woman who's managed to live her life at the very edge in a rural community, shunned by the rest of the community, and going, you know what? I'll save him, and maybe I can put him to work.
Yeah.
Without being what's that? Lars von Trier.
Dogtown?
Dogville.
Dogville.
Somebody in the chat, help
it
us out. Yeah. You know what? I'm going to have to think about this film a bit more. I still, even more now at the end, I'm still saying it's a see it, but it's got problems. Big asterisks. It does, Jim, pass the baby test.
Dogville?
Dogville.
Sorry. Yeah, Dogville. It is Dogville, 2003.
All right.
2003. I just did want to mention that earlier on, as a criticism, I said I had written down the cruelty is the point, but looking, after having chatted with it a bit too, maybe the cruelty is just an ingredient, that I suspect, it's hard to.
Walt makes a great comment here on that. No, finish your thought, but I'm looking forward to reading Walt's comment on that.
You wouldn't want a gentler depiction of this sort of time. I guess with my issue, it's more tonally, like it's sort of tonally weird that you'll have a fun fight 1 minute, and then you'll have sort of like a sexual assault the next, and then you'll have sort of a man on a woman that, so it's kind of a weird mix of tones, but the cruelty is maybe not just the point, but probably part of the ingredients
Let me read Walt's comment, because this isn't the first time he's talked about Grindhouse, which he's firmly placing that in there. Although he has only seen the trailer, but I think he's got a point here. He says, okay, but Grindhouse from the 70s was a very, very nasty, violent genre. So
Yeah.
trying it in our more enlightened times is a strange ask, especially in home streaming.
Yeah.
But I think he's got a point there. It's maybe it does make, if we just look at the art as the piece, maybe, I don't know. He's right. Like, I mean, it's a tough thing to try and accomplish. Oh, and then he says, touche. I think that was my crack about, well, listen, Kurosawa was Ford. And that wasn't like just, Walt, I hope you took it in a better spirit than perhaps my zinger threw it out there. Okay. DMG, just want to quickly, DMG, I'm worthy of a needle skip. And Walt, and Ford was influenced by the painter Remington, absolutely, and on it goes. Okay, now people talking back and forth. Oh, yeah, NHL playoffs for the Vikings. Or what are they called? The Knights.
Golden Knights.
There we go. All right. The official cheer apparently is supposed to be Go Knights Go, but his version is all the way VGK. Yeah, that ain't bad, actually. Not great, but not bad.
Yeah.
All right, more. Yeah, Dogville, Richard chimed in. DMG. The Little Mermaid was pretty creepy, too, when Ariel is affected by an amnesia spell and all her friends sing Kiss the Girl when she's mentally compromised. Yeah, even when I said it, I'm like, oh, we could go on for an hour about
exactly.
weird Disney
Weird
moments.
choices. Yeah.
Lars Ventura was also Dogma 95.
Yes, yeah.
But Dogville being that creepy AF.
Nicole Kidman.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2003, though. That seemed 20 years ago. That's crazy.
Okay, Jim, why don't I think it is, I do believe, it's time for final thoughts.
Sure. This is a really interesting, the movie, this is a real interesting time. This is the end of the war. And you've had a few movies about it lately. The Monuments Men, I believe, was one, which was sort of not as good as I thought it would be. And
I think this is way better than that, but sorry, go on.
Yeah. So I just wanted to point out there's a really sort of an uneven Netflix series, not even sure if it's still there, with Taylor Kitsch about the last days of, post-war Berlin, called The Defeated. It also goes by the name Shadow Play, I think, in the UK or overseas. It's quite cruel and sort of deals with a serial killer a little bit, which, I've sort of had it up to here with serial killers, but being set where it's set. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. I quite enjoyed it. Had some notes about it, but I thought it was worth a view. So if you like this kind of era or are curious about it, that's definitely a place to go to. Ultimately, skip it, but, it's not a bad watch. There's some good things going on here. I just found it was ultimately kind of tonally a little bit weird, and some of the choices were a little bit disappointing. But I can see your point, too, that it did take it a step further. My last point, too, it's interesting this is a German film, and I would be curious to see the German reaction to this, so...
That's a great point. And I thought of it. I was even thinking of reaching out to my German friends.
Yeah.
Hello, if you're watching, just to see how German film critics reacted to it. Did not have time to do the research. I started watching this last night, and then I had something came up, and so I watched it this evening. I'll say, though, for myself, Jim, for all the reasons I've already stated, because it is not ignoring its context, I can get over a lot of the other stuff because it's fun. There's some actual fun. The two good characters, live. He's reunited with his daughter. You know what? I'll take that. I'll take that for 100-minute movie on Netflix that isn't boring. It never.
Yeah.
I think it could have been better. I think it could have been an even more interesting film. I think the story could have been better told, but it makes enough turns, enough earned turns, it kept me interested. And yeah, like it's the first time I've said on this channel that yes, you can have a Western that isn't American, and I think it deserves. Heck, Jim, it deserves the full applause. All of the applause for that. But that is interesting, Jim. This is one of the very few films that we disagreed on and stuck with our disagreement right to the end.
Yeah.
I mean, we got through it. It was a conversation, you know. We didn't take anything personally.
Nope.
Yeah. Next,
we weren't resorting to Siskel and Ebert like digs, like the clip you sent me earlier today.
You did not one fat joke. Whoa. Wonder how long they were doing their thing together after that.
Yeah.
Yikes. All right, folks. Thank you all. Whoopsie. Thank you all very much for coming out tonight. That goes to Richard L., Katie Fowler, DMG, Walt 65. Great to see you here. And, of course, our Mad in Kuwait City, Ahmed, or Jelly Duck 100.
Jelly Duck.
Follow him on Twitch. Folks, thanks all very much. There'll be links to subscribe. Over that way, there'll be links to some great content YouTube's decided you should see next. Goodbye, everybody.
See you, folks. Alrighty. Just going to quickly go to the bathroom, and I'll be right back up.